The music swelled through the golden ballroom like champagne bubbles, soft, elegant, and intoxicating. Crystal chandeliers shimmered over a sea of glittering gowns and tuxedos. It was the annual Silvercrest Gala, where billionaires came to toast themselves and whisper about the next big deal. At the far end of the hall, Raymond Ellis stood with a glass of sparkling water in his hand, his jaw tight but his eyes steady. He wasn't born into this world of silk and gold. He built his company, Ellis Dynamics, from nothing but sleepless nights and grit, turning an idea into a global tech powerhouse. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration, the night he would finalize a $1 billion merger with Harlow Industries, sealing a future of innovation and legacy. Beside him stood his wife, Alina, regal in an emerald gown, her laughter light as music. Her beauty wasn't just in her looks, but in the warmth she carried. She had been with him since the days when their apartment had flickering lights and the fridge was mostly empty. They had made it, or so they thought. Across the room, Edward Harlow, the billionaire tycoon and owner of Harlow Industries, held court with a crowd of investors. His grin was sharp, his voice commanding. Edward was a man who believed the world bent for him. When he saw Raymond and Alina approaching, that grin faltered just slightly. "Ray." "My man of the hour," Edward greeted, clapping a heavy hand on Raymond's shoulder. "And this must be the lovely Mrs. Ellis." Alina extended her hand with polite grace. "It's a pleasure, Mr. Harlow." Edward's eyes flicked over her, lingering too long. "You're full of surprises, Ray," he said, his tone dipping into something that wasn't quite admiration. "Didn't think a woman like her would be interested in tech guys." Raymond's smile froze. "A woman like her?" Edward chuckled, swirling his whiskey. "You know what I mean, grace, beauty, confidence. She's got presence, not what you see every day." There was a faint tremor in Alina's expression, but she brushed it aside with poise. "You flatter me, Mr. Harlow." The conversation moved to business, but the air grew tight. Edward bragged about his jets, his homes, his art collections. Raymond listened with patience, knowing arrogance often came with wealth. Still, something about Edward's tone gnawed at him, a careless superiority that felt poisonous. Later, as waiters glided by with trays of champagne, Edward led them to the pool terrace outside. The moonlight rippled across the water like silver fire. Guests laughed nearby, oblivious to the tension brewing in the air. Edward leaned against the railing. "You know, Ray," he said, slurring slightly now, "this deal of ours, it's not just business. It's about people who fit in the same world." Raymond frowned. "I believe integrity and innovation are what define a partnership." Edward smirked. Sure. But this world, these rooms, it's not for everyone. Some people just stand out too much." His eyes shifted again toward Alina. Alina's smile faded. "What exactly are you implying?" Edward shrugged. "Nothing. Just saying this circle has expectations. Optics matter." He took a sip and leaned closer, lowering his voice. "$1 billion deal, Ray. Don't let it sink over appearances." Raymond's hand clenched around his glass. "Edward, you're crossing a line." Edward laughed. "Relax, I'm just—" But before he could finish, Alina stepped forward. "You should apologize," she said quietly. "Now." Edward's grin turned cruel. "Apologize to you?" And before anyone could react, Edward's hand shot out. He shoved her, hard. The sound of her gasp cut through the night as her body fell backward into the pool. The crowd froze. The splash echoed like thunder. "Alina!" Raymond shouted, throwing his glass aside and diving in. He reached her within seconds, pulling her up, her gown heavy and clinging. Gasps rippled through the onlookers as Raymond carried her out, his face cold as stone. Edward chuckled nervously. "It was a joke." "Come on, don't make a scene." Raymond's eyes blazed. "A joke? You humiliated my wife in front of everyone." Edward raised his hands. "She overreacted. You know how—" Raymond stepped forward, his voice low but trembling with fury. "If I ever hear your voice again, it'll be in court." "The deal," he spat the word like poison, "is off." Edward blinked, his smirk fading. "You're bluffing. You need this deal." Raymond turned to Alina, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders. "No, I don't need money that comes with rot." He led her away as flashes from cameras began to strobe, whispers trailing them like smoke. By morning, the incident was everywhere. Billionaire Harlow pushes CEO's wife into pool at Gala. Headlines screamed from every financial site, every social feed. Public outrage exploded. Edward Harlow's PR team scrambled to contain the storm, but the damage was irreversible. At Ellis Dynamics headquarters, Raymond sat quietly in his office. Alina entered, her hair still damp from a morning shower, her eyes soft but weary. "You canceled it," she said gently. "I did," he replied. "We could have lost everything. The merger was the biggest in our company's history." She sat beside him, taking his hand. "You did what was right. That man thought he could buy respect. You showed him he couldn't." Raymond looked at her, emotion cracking his calm exterior. "I just keep thinking, what if people say I overreacted?" "Then let them," she said firmly. They didn't feel that moment. They didn't feel the hatred behind that laugh. He closed his eyes, her words sinking deep. Later that week, reporters swarmed his doorstep, begging for statements. But Raymond said nothing, until a press conference 2 weeks later. He stood on stage before a room full of journalists, cameras flashing like lightning. "I've been asked why I walked away from $1 billion, he began. His voice was calm but full of conviction. "Let me answer clearly. No amount of money can justify disrespect. No profit can cleanse arrogance or bigotry. I built my company to stand for something greater than wealth, to stand for dignity, for fairness, for what's right." He paused, letting the silence stretch. When power blinds people to basic humanity, that's when real strength is tested. "I'd rather lose a deal than lose myself." The room erupted in applause. Months passed. Edward Harlow's empire began to crumble. Investors pulled out, partnerships dissolved, lawsuits followed. His arrogance had finally met its reckoning. Meanwhile, Ellis Dynamics thrived, quietly, steadily. Raymond found new partners, honest ones who admired his integrity more than his balance sheet. One evening, as the sun melted over the skyline, Alina stood on their balcony, watching the city glow. Raymond joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Remember that night?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I'll never forget it." "I thought it was the worst night of our lives," he said. "But maybe it was the start of something better." She smiled, leaning into him. "Sometimes you have to lose gold to find your worth." He kissed her forehead, the city lights flickering like stars below. And in that quiet moment, they both knew real wealth wasn't measured in billions, but in the courage to stand for what's right, even when the world watches and whispers. Moral: true power isn't in fortune or fame, it's in the strength to protect dignity, love, and truth no matter the cost.